G'day, this is Owen, and welcome back to the next episode of The Pub Test. And in this one, we are looking at the very interesting case of Michael Peterson. This became really famous, I suppose. Now, in this case, there's been a documentary, I believe, called The Staircase. Just recently, there's been a dramatisation of this particular event in a bit of a based on real events little mini-series. Unfortunately, I think that has created a bit of confusion because the evidence presented in that documentary wasn't exactly based totally on fact. Now, we understand it was a dramatisation, and so you can take a little bit of artistic license. But for me, I really don't like that. Because it's like reading a good book, and then they make a movie out of it, and they change things. And you know that's not right. That's not exactly what the author wrote about. Now, in the dramatisation, they've taken a bit of artistic license, and I get it, you can. Because they want people to watch the show, not necessarily present a factual case. So therefore, I think it is worthwhile revisiting just to really nut out the actual details of what happened in this particular story. And there's a couple of reasons why this case became well known, mainly because the main suspect, Michael Peterson, was a well-known writer. So if you don't know anything about this case, I don't know where you can find the actual documentary, The Staircase. I think Netflix may have the dramatisation. But if you just want the bare bone facts, then hang around here and we'll dive right into it. So just as a very quick overview, we've already said Michael himself was a famous writer. His wife, though, Kathleen, she was also an executive in a telecommunications company. She had her own career and was very successful. And by all reports, they were quite happily married. So you could understand, with a bit of wine and Valium in your system, and apparently that was a common occurrence, both of them enjoyed the good old tipple, that you may be unsteady on your feet and you could easily fall down the stairs. Yet, when they investigated it, they found that there was basically hits on the head, for want of any better term. Could that have happened, falling and hitting the handrail, which apparently was sharp? Well, it's possible, isn't it? We could think that would be what happened. But the death was ruled to be blunt force trauma from repeated blows to the head. Now, a hot poker for the fire was missing. And that tool would be consistent with the injuries. So it would seem that she's been hit on the head and then maybe pushed down the stairs. And why we suggest that, and why the prosecution probably thought that too, was because there was blood going down the staircase. So it's not like she was attacked at the bottom of the staircase, if this theory is correct. So it had to have been at the top of the staircase and then she's fallen down. But what would cause this? Why would this happen, considering there was only 2 people in the house? Well, Michael's personal life was interesting, to say the least. And considering 20 years ago when this happened, his private life would have been considered scandalous at the time, because he also had an interest in men. And apparently he had racy photos of men on his computer. So the theory is that Kathleen's seen these images on the computer. She's had a massive blow up. They've got into an argument. And the result was she's ended up at the bottom of the staircase. Now, if you see that original documentary, the expert witness doing the blood spatter patterns shows very clearly that their version of events of what happened, of being hit over the head, the blood spatter was perfect to match what they believed. And so therefore, with only 2 people in the house, the poker's missing, these things on the computer, all of that clearly points to the only other person in the house being responsible. And yes, he was convicted. And considering this was 20 years ago, Michael's personal life no doubt was a bit prejudicial, hence the prosecution brought it up. They wanted to show that this was just scandalous, that this married man being interested not only just in other people, but people of the same sex. Now, it wasn't just his personal private life that maybe got him into a bit of trouble. Oddly enough, this wasn't the first time he'd been around an incident where someone had fallen down the stairs to their death. Now, previously, in another country, he'd gone and visited someone. The following morning, they're found at the bottom of the stairs. Initially, it's put down to a bit of an aneurysm in the brain to the person. But when later this became known, they looked into it further and said that looks like that person was beaten to death. Similar circumstances to what's faced here. So all in all, we'd have to say it's an open and shut case. He's been convicted, he's put in prison, and really, is there any doubt? Well, let's have a look at some of the evidence. Now, when we're looking through this, it's not going to just be a case of the police had it all wrong. There's some question marks about a lot of the evidence, and even when things are found, there's still going to be doubts, for sure. For example, the fire poker that was missing, that they said would have been consistent with causing the injuries, was found somewhere else in the house at a later time. So it's then examined and no evidence was found to show that it was involved in the crime. Still, I question that because enough time has gone by where you could have cleaned it up, could have got rid of any evidence of it being used, for sure. But it did raise doubt whether or not he used that fire poker. And as regards that previous time where someone had fallen down the steps to their death, that he was involved with, or at least around, he adopted that person's 2 children. And they had no suspicions that he was involved in that in any way. And those 2 children, even today, still maintain that he had nothing to do with Kathleen's demise as well. So when they point to his private life and talk about images on the computer, well, it was found that that computer was not activated that evening. So that was not the cause of an argument. And by most reports, Kathleen was aware of Michael's outside of marriage interests and was okay with that. And so if 2 consenting adults, and you're not hurting anyone else, agree to certain arrangements, well then that's up to them. But 20 years ago, this definitely probably made a few jurors look at Michael in a different light. And as I understand, what's presented in the dramatisation about this particular case shows that the argument was over something on the computer that evening. And yet the facts show that that wasn't the case at all. That did not happen. Now, Michael's conviction was overturned, vacated, or whatever it was, but he was getting a retrial. because the expert who did the blood spatter evidence, who very convincingly showed that these actions caused the blood on the wall, his evidence was basically thrown out. In fact, he'd testified in many cases as an expert witness, and it was shown that he wasn't right at all. In fact, one person basically said from his field that it's basically guesswork, and you try and find a way to prove your theory, and you can do that with anything. So the blood spatter evidence was thrown out. And it was during this time a very, very strange theory came up. And it was to do with an owl. Now somewhere, don't know how, but people found a feather or two as evidence and said it looks like Kathleen went outside, got attacked by this owl, so the talons have caused the damage on her head, and as she was trying to get back up the steps, she's fallen, and that's what happened. That seems very, very fanciful, doesn't it? It seems totally beyond what you could write in a book. People would say that's just unbelievable. Yet, people have been attacked by owls. So it's not out of the realm of total possibility, even though it really does seem to be very far-fetched. So now he's facing this new trial. So there's no blood spatter evidence. There's these other theories, the owl theory. And there's been a fair bit of media on this. And time's gone by where his personal life probably won't play such a big part in the deciding of the case. But they make him an offer to take an Alfred plea and get charged with manslaughter, which he takes. Now, an Alfred plea, if you don't know, is where you accept the fact the prosecution has enough evidence to probably convict you, but you don't admit guilt. You still get convicted, and you get a conviction recorded on your record, but you can walk away saying, but I disagree and I'm maintaining my innocence. You still will serve time and the penalties to do with your crime that you've been charged with. But it turns out that his case, he already had served the time, so he left court that day as a free person. Many people would say, well, he took the Alfred plea, therefore he must have done it. And that is the problem with Alfred pleas. People assume then that the person's just not wanting to admit it, but they know that they did it. But in his particular case, at his age, when this deal was offered, knowing that you're going to walk out of that courtroom, you're not going to go back to prison, you'd have to really consider it. Because you're not in a winning situation at all. Because people are going to still think you've done it, regardless. You won't be able to really have a normal life again anyway. That's gone. But at least you're not locked up in prison. I would never want to be in that situation, but we're going to cover a case where people have taken Alfred pleas and it really looks like they really never did it. So, just because he agreed to that plea deal, I don't think necessarily points to the fact that he did it. And just as another little bit of evidence which I think may point to the fact that he could be innocent, is that when this owl theory came up, that maybe the talons have dug into Kathleen's head and that's what's caused it, he never really ran with that. Even recently in the media, he said, well, it's conceivable that that could happen. But he doesn't say, oh yeah, see, I've been ripped off all along because this owl could have come down and done that. He's never really run with it. And as a writer, I think I understand why, because you're thinking no one's going to believe that anyway. I couldn't put that in a story and people think, well, that happened. So because he hasn't just jumped on every little detail trying to prove innocence, can show someone confident in the truth that they're telling. But there is one piece to this puzzle that I've always struggled with. There were two people in the house. After midnight, someone's fallen down the steps. Now, if the owl theory is true, the thought was, for whatever reason, Kathleen's decided to put out some Christmas decorations on the lawn outside or something, and then the owls come down and attacked. That would have created a bit of noise, I'd guess. But assuming that's not even the case, that she's just wandering around the house for whatever reason, and then taking a tumble, and to fall down the stairs and hit your head that amount of times is going to create some noise. There's no suggestion ever that that's what got Michael to go and look. Because then you would think you would find her the next morning, not in the middle of the night. See, he never said, I heard a noise, I heard something happening. Now that all could be coincidental. The house could be huge, maybe he didn't hear anything. But that raises doubts in my mind. Forgive the change of shirt, but I just had to do a really, really quick edit. Apparently Michael came in, he says, and he said this at a later time, that he came into the house around 2:30, so he was already outside. So he wouldn't have heard anything inside necessarily, but I still find that just strange. Just a little bit of detail which raises some doubt in my mind. So was justice served in this case? Perhaps. Someone has been convicted. Again, I don't think Kathleen's family are overly happy with the whole arrangement of things, which you can understand. But then also on Michael's side, there's people that support him and think that he was unjustly treated. So I don't think there will ever be winners in this particular case. And now, with that Alfred plea, no further investigation will ever go into this particular case. I don't think the recent documentary series with a bit of fictional stuff in there is helpful to anybody, but that's what people can do with stories. They can take them and change them. So that's my take on the Staircase saga. Yeah, I think partly justice has been done. So again, if you like the content, do all the usuals. Also, if you want to help us out, actually, if you want to check out The Power of History, the first book, it's a trilogy, working on the others. There's another book coming out before the next one's in The Power of History, but keep an eye out. We're actually going to make some announcements in a couple of weeks about the next book coming out. But yeah, do all the usuals. Check us out. Like, subscribe, share if you want to. And we will see you on the next one. I'm Owen, and I'm out.